dear students, welcome to Tungal online classes. So in the last video what we were discussing was, it was how did life origin on this earth was the concept, right? And in support of that one, two theories supported that one. How? So they explained how the first life was originated on this earth, right? One is Coas-Servais theory proposed by Oparin, right? And second is Sidney Fox microsphere theory, right? As you know, Oparin named these spherical shaped structures as what? Coas-Servais. In the same way, microspheres was the name given to the same Coas-Servais by Sidney Fox. Hence, the theory name itself is said to be as what? It is said to as microsphere theory. It is said to as, right? So I hope it is very clear to you. What kind of living characteristic feature microspheres used to exhibit was? So I was dealing with the same thing. So what are the characteristic features? Characters. What the characters they were exhibiting was, so just they were exhibiting osmosis, and they have semi-permeable membrane like boundary, right? Semi-permeable, boundary, right? Because of this semi-permeable boundary only they exhibited what? Osmosis. And so they began to divide themselves into two equal sized or unequal sized fragments itself, right? So that is, they start to replicate themselves into two halves by binary fission. What it indicates, it's also one of the characteristic feature of all the living organisms. They can replicate themselves by binary fission or sometimes by fragmentation. What is this property said as a reproduction, right? This kind of properties were exhibited by what? Microspheres, by microsphere, characteristic features of microspheres. Okay, so these are some characteristic features which fundamentally prove that, so these are the forerunners of the cells, right? So according to these two scientists, that is A.I. Oparin and Sidney Fox, A.I. Oparin and Sidney Fox, according to this one, so Coas-Servais as well as microspheres are the runners of the first form of life on earth, right? Life on earth, right? So this is how the first form of life that originated on this earth. I hope you are getting the points, right? You are getting the points, you are understanding very well this one, right? And this kind of cells are said to be as what? Protobionts or pre-cell. It is called as pre-cell or protocell, like this, or ebionts. These were named as. So by these different names they were named, right? So this is about the microsphere theory as well as Coas-Servais theory. And later, what happened over here is the development that continued from here after itself. What kind of development that continued over here? I hope it is visible. Okay, what kind of development continued? See here, the nucleic acids, what were present in cells, right? So nucleic acids in the pre-cell, so they helped in replication, not only in the replication of the nucleic acid, but also they helped in directing some of the processes. Some of the processes were directed, like what kind of processes were directed over here? That is metabolic pathways were directed over here, right? So this kind of processes were directed in these pre-cells, especially that is protobionts. When such kind of metabolic processes that started, even these nucleic acid duplication started, so all these are exhibiting what? The living characteristic features. They were exhibiting the living characteristic features, right? So this is a more important aspect to be remembered over here, right? And later, so this kind of evolution, what we call it as is molecular evolution. What it is described as molecular evolution. So this molecular evolution is nothing but evolution that is occurring in biomolecules especially, and this leads to what? Biological evolution later, right? This leads to biological evolution. So there, what happened over here is, so initially what these protobionts are formed, so the first form of the life is said to be as heterotrophic in nature. See here, the first form of life is heterotrophic one in nature. Means they used to depend on other organic matter what is present in the sea water. Why? Because life originated inside the water itself, right? In the sea water, whatever the organic material is there, they start to consume it and they start to make a competition with the others for getting their food, right? So this is heterotrophic in the sense that they depend on organic material present in seawater, right? So present in seawater, and they start to compete for food. They start to compete for the food and consume maximum number of food or the organic material what is present inside the seawater. I hope it is very clear now. So then when these heterotrophic organisms, so they start to survive themselves, getting their food themselves, and so what kind of a reaction they would have performed, or what kind of a digestive system, so what kind of a digestion they might have followed over here, metabolic processes they would have followed over here is fermentation. By fermentation only they used to get their energy, right? This is the metabolic processes what they followed, right? So there was no particular digestive system was there, so they used to get the organic food and break down it in absence of oxygen. That is nothing but fermentation. They used to break down the organic materials in absence of oxygen, so that is a fermentation process. They used to get their energy for utilization of that energy for different purposes, right? By these organisms. Initially they were all heterotrophic in nature. Heterotrophic, especially anaerobic. What kind of organisms these are? These are also anaerobic in nature. Why? Because there was no oxygen existing on those days. right? So this was also one more thing, and one more drastic change that immediately occurred. So in chemical evolution theory, that is development of chlorophyll pigment. Development of chlorophyll pigment took place. When chlorophyll was developed, that moment what happened? So there photosynthesis started. What started here? Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis was started, and when photosynthesis started, oxygen started to release. Right? In the atmosphere, the content of this oxygen goes on increasing. Right? The concentration of oxygen increased in atmosphere later. When the concentration of oxygen increases, it leads to what? So it leads to the formation of ozone layer. It leads to the formation of ozone layer, and when this ozone layer was so formed, that moment different varieties of organisms were formed as a result of mutations or so different type of changes that occurred in the genetic material of this one, right? So now what happened? So heterotrophs and aerobic organisms were existing basically, and after that one, so here autotrophs were developed. When so photosynthesis started, that moment they were all autotrophs. Development of autotrophs took place. These autotrophs, they start to release more oxygen, and the concentration of the oxygen increases in the atmosphere. Ozone layer is formed, and diversity, that is biodiversity, started on this earth. Means different kinds of organisms, they developed themselves as a result of mutation or some other actions that took place, that bring about a various number of changes in the genetical material of the organisms, that leads to the formation of biodiversity on this earth. Right? This was how the formation of the life that took place on this earth itself. Right? So I hope you have understood all these one, right? So let us see. So in all these activities, since in the last class, from the beginning class, so whatever the things, chemical evolution theory, the things what I was explaining, all are written in form of flow charts. Then you can understand how the first form of life that developed on this earth. Let us go through that flow chart now. Yes, first of all, what was present was primitive earth was there. Primitive earth was there. So there was nothing was there. Only what were there? Atoms were there. Hydrogen was there. Oxygen was there. Nitrogen was there. Right? So as well as carbon was there. So as well as helium was there. All these are the atoms of these gases were existing previously, and later what happened? So all these are converted themselves into inorganic substances. Like what kind of inorganic? Since hydrogen is most reactive in nature, it started to combine with what? Oxygen, so as to form H2O was in the form of vapor, it was developed, and later NH3 or NH4 was formed, and CH4 was formed. Like this, all these are the inorganic substances that formed. And after these inorganic substances, organic substances, they were converted into. What they were converted into? Organic substances. What kind of organic substances? Amino acids were formed, fatty acids were formed, or the fats were formed, and proteins were formed, right? Proteins were formed, as well as later nucleic acids were formed. Like this, all these are the organic organic substances that are formed over here. And after this one, so what happened over here is, so here macromolecules were formed, sugars were formed, right? Sugars were formed, all these were formed initially, right? So see here, macromolecules like what? Proteins, already have written, proteins were formed, especially fats were formed, right? And polysugars were formed. So all these are the macromolecules that are formed over here, right? See here, organic substances, whatever they are formed in form of amino acids, fatty acids, and so nucleotides were present. All these were converted themselves into macromolecules, right? Macromolecules were formed, and from these macromolecules, what formed? So coarse surfaces were made, microspheres were made of signifox as well as ioparin, right? These coarse surfaces later they were converted into heterotrophs. What they converted into? Heterotrophs. And these heterotrophs later converted into autotrophs, right? So heterotrophs, these were anaerobic, and later so autotrophs they became aerobic. These autotrophs, whatever they are, nothing but they are plants, they developed into, right? So initially many number of plants they are, so they started to photosynthesis, they started itself, and it leads to what? Biodiversity. It leads to what? Biodiversity. See, this is how the origin of life took place on this earth itself, right? This flow chart would help us to remember all the events what happened on the prebiotic earth up to it became biotic earth, means biosphere it becomes, right? So this is the flow chart. And one more question that arises over here, right? What is that question? See here, these inorganic components that converted into organic substances or organic components, how is it possible? That was a big question. That's why, so there experimentally it is being proved by two scientists. One is Urey and Miller. Especially, so Urey is the teacher of professor of Miller. So Miller did this experiment. So and hence it is called as Urey-Miller's experiment. So both of these worked on the concept how did these so inorganic components convert themselves into organic components, right? This is the experiment, very important for you people for examination point of view. It is usually asked for 5 marks, especially to draw the diagram, right? So one of the material Miller used over here, and that material so is called as what? It is called as Miller's apparatus. What it is called as Miller's apparatus he used. So as to prove the inorganic components that converted into organic components over here. So how did he prove? Let us see now itself. Yes, this is Miller's apparatus. Urey and Miller's experiment. Urey and Miller's experiment. So in their experiment what they did is how inorganic compounds converted themselves into organic ones. This is the main concept of this experiment. And in this experiment Miller used his apparatus, and that apparatus is called as Miller's apparatus. Let us go through that apparatus, how that apparatus is. Let us draw the diagram of the same, right? So it is made up of glass flasks as well as what? Glass tubes. See here, this is the flask what he used, and used another flask over here. Okay, and this is where he used one more tube that makes what? Condenser. And this condenser so like this. The diagram is as an NCERT book. Okay. Okay. So this is said as Miller's apparatus, in which he introduced two electrodes over here which are connected to different terminals of the battery, right? And in his apparatus what he maintained is, so he maintained prebiotic Earth atmosphere. He maintained prebiotic Earth atmosphere. Why? Because so he wanted to know in that condition only how the prebiotic Earth's atmosphere was. It was reducing atmosphere. What kind of atmosphere was present on those days? It was reducing atmosphere. Right? In this reducing atmosphere, what were present? So some of the inorganic gases were present over here, and those gases he took inside this chamber. This is called as gas chamber or discharge chamber. It is also said here. What are the gases he took is hydrogen he took, as well as methane, ammonia, right? As well as water vapor. Alright, how this water vapor he took later I shall show you. Alright, see here, so he maintained prebiotic atmosphere over here, and he took water inside this RBF. Right, he took water inside and he heated this water over here. He just heated this water over here so as to get the vapor. Right. See here, in the prebiotic Earth atmosphere, what were present? All these gases were present, and so even water vapor was also present over here in this reducing atmosphere. So he wanted to know whether these inorganic components are converted themselves into organic compounds or not. So if so, whether it takes place or not. So he wanted to know. He was very curious about it. So that's why he heated this water, and water start to vapor. It start to vaporize, and the vapor it start to come over here. It will start to come towards what? This gas chamber. When this water in form of vapor came into this gas chamber, and it contains different gases, and he sparkled, right? So sparkling was made by himself over here in the gas chamber. What is the sparkling indicating? So it indicates that on those days in the reducing atmosphere or on the prebiotic Earth atmosphere, so there lightning was present, right? Thunder as well as lightning was present. Why? Because the torrential rains were going on. So lightning, so in form of, so what? Sparkling heat made over here. When it sparkled over here, at moment the reaction started among all these inorganic gases. What started? Reaction started over here. When the reaction started over here, after the reaction, the droplets, vapors that come down, and this is said to be as what? Condenser. What it is said to as? Condenser. And in this condenser continuously made to flow the water in and out over here. When he made the water to enter in and out, that moment these vapors, they converted into droplets. They converted themselves into droplets. And these droplets mainly consisting of what? Organic compounds. What they did contain? Organic compounds. So these droplets, they come down and they were collected inside the trap over here. They were collected inside the trap over here. Okay. And whenever this substance, water vapor or water with organic compounds, whenever it was caught inside this trap, what is this called as? This part itself is said to be as water trap itself. Right? So this trap it was collected, and the experiment was repeated several times. He repeated the experiment for several times, and so he collected this material or the watery substance what is present inside the trap outside. He collected outside and start to analyze what is there in that water. He wanted to know what actually is present inside that water. So that was, fortunately, that was containing, water was containing what? Organic substances like amino acids. Right? So what it contained? So this trap material that contained means that water contained organic substances like especially the amino acids. What it shows? It shows that so the inorganic components what they reacted among themselves in presence of lightning. So lightning is one of the source of energy, right? Geothermal heat was there as a source of energy. Volcanic eruption it was taking place, that was also what? Giving energy, heat energy. Such kind of energies are utilized in the reducing atmosphere so as to convert these inorganic components into organic components. It was very clear to Urey as well as Miller. They are the first scientists, the one who proved. So there in the reducing atmosphere, inorganic compounds were converted into organic ones. Is that very clear? So this reducing the atmosphere gradually, so whenever the autotrophs develop, that moment it is converted itself. This reducing atmosphere converted itself into oxidized one. Oxidizing atmosphere. It converted into oxidizing atmosphere. See the difference? See the difference, right? So this is how Urey and Miller are the two scientists, the one who succeeded in so as to prove that so in the reducing atmosphere how did these organic components that converted to organic compounds. Right? So this is about the Urey and Miller's experiment. So definitely in the examination this apparatus diagram is usually asked for 5 marks, right? So that's why all these labelings as well as, so this is what? Water, this is vapor, right? So like this all these are labeled over here. Correctly you have to label and make it so perfect, easy, right? So thank you. So Urey and Miller's experiment. By this I am going to conclude my class here only, and so in the next class we will continue the same other topic, right? Thank you very much.